Hey YouTube, Dustin Dolby here, what's happening? Today I'm going to run you through a really easy workflow for glassware photography, something that can be a little tricky on a black background. And we will be shooting these with Speedlights, really cheap Speedlights, an entry-level camera, and we're just shooting these on a piece of black acrylic at the base. And I'll kind of run you through my system for achieving this in more of like a 3D look than just a strictly edge or rim lighting approach from the side. I want something with a little more dimension, and I'll show you my system for achieving this pretty easily. Let's dive in. So I don't know how well you can see from there, but we have a piece of black foam core, which is our $1 store item just hanging out in the background there. And we have our two strip boxes with Speedlights in them, which will hopefully do some justice to the perimeter of the glass and carve it out a little bit. And I have these pulled back further than the surface, so they're kind of behind the glassware. And maybe we could just take a look at like one of the really classic edge light heavy looks that you see. And you'd probably still want a rim light in this as well, but it's pretty easy to just bring lights symmetrically. I'd probably put them further back on a 45 because the base looks nice for sure, but if you look at the stem, the highlights are really inward. So it kind of gives a false perception when you back it up. So I'd probably back these up a little bit if I was going for something like that, but you can always pivot them forward as well. That won't solve our position problem. But if you even pivot them a little thicker from the perspective of the glass, you can really change the character of your highlight, which I find interesting about that. And it makes for, really consistent shoots. Which is nice. We're not going all the way to the bottom, it's fading out, but we still have some light getting in the bowl. And it's nice. I probably like the thinner of these two, but it's good to have those options. And I might even bring something like the base from a symmetrical lighting in later if I liked it more than something else, because sometimes symmetry looks nice in the base. Even though I might go for something a little asymmetrical today, we'll see. Why don't I turn one of these off? And I'll just get this out of the way. And we'll just light with one strip box. So let's try to catch the break down here and move this really close. And we'll just position this one until we love it. So it's a little funky, but we did get down there, and that is an option. If you just want to have a complete rim light down the edge, you could even flip this over symmetrically. And you see we get a kind of reverse reflection going through the other side when we are lighting like this. And you don't see that problem when you're lighting symmetrically because they kind of overlap each other a little. But you see how lighting works in glassware, and it is kind of trippy and it's tricky. Normally I don't try to chase waterfalls, as they say, when it comes to catching the light down here, because I might shoot a bunch of different bowl shapes, right? And the more radically angled ones might end up being a really big headache. So sometimes I'll just settle for like a traditional placement, kind of like I had before, where you're just catching some of the glass on the side, but you're not obsessing over getting that highlight right to the bottom. Just so when I do get to those other bowl shapes, they're not causing me trouble. And I can brighten this area in other ways, similar to how we did just by having some like secondary light floating around down here. And then I might just move our second light to give the front of the glass a little more definition, something we didn't do before. So let me turn this on again. And ever so carefully, I'll navigate this minefield. And this is on 1/32 power, my strip box. And now this is going to go in the front of the glass, so we should catch some definition. We got a 2-light setup. So you see that's a little bit different, but it starts to give us more of a 3D look because we're seeing the front be defined a little bit with a reflection, a reverse reflection. And we're starting to get an idea of the 3 dimensions of the glassware just because of the fact that you see where the highlights go to up the top, but you see the back going through is a piece of glass. So you're starting to get the shape a little bit more, and I like that. Now this is a really harsh look, just having one strip box like that. Usually I will diffuse that. Let me grab some diffusers. And I've been rocking out a lot lately on the channel with the doubles, the 2 cheapos put together. I call it like a poor man's Savage Translume. No, I do have a Savage Translume here, but these are pretty handy, I gotta say. So if we want to give this some extra definition, let's bring in some diffusion here. And that's cool how instantly you start to get what I can only describe as glass vibes, because you really just start to get a glassy look. It's a bit of a matte look because it's going right to the edge. And you see we're getting some nice definition in the glass. The reverse reflection's working overtime over here. It's defining things nicely. And it's kind of mimicking having a second strip box over there. So last time I had some distance in between my diffusion material. Hopefully you can see this. My diffuser and the strip box. I had some distance there, which is why it looks a little matte. This time I'm going to press it right up against the strip box, so there's a nice hard edge. And that's great. So we got something a lot glossier, and altogether is giving us a good 3D look. We need to get the rim looking bright. And I'm sure there's some things we could do to the base. I might flip this over. But it's a pretty big contrast from where we started once you bring in the frontal light, because that really starts to define things. So why don't we do a rim light at the top, literally a rim light. We'll do this really simply. I'll turn this strip box off. And I'll take the Speedlight from this strip box out. And let me just make sure this is on the right mode here. So to grab this rim light, I'm just going to use the same diffusers on a 2-second timer, and I'm just going to go for something up here, because if you think of the angles, they're going to kind of project off the rim and kind of bounce up here somewhere. So I want a big diffused light source over here. So let's see how this goes. So it's a little foggy, like it's not super stark, but this is so bright here, the little halo, that it will totally be editable into this scene. So that's a pretty easy setup. So what I would probably do to composite this reliably is just take something like this rim light and then something like this base with the nice glossy highlight, not the matte one. And that would be what I'd bring into post-production. So why don't I grab this frame and I'll grab this, and we'll meet inside of Photoshop and we'll throw this together lickety-split. So before we jump into Photoshop, let me tell you about some of the Skillshare classes I've been taking, today's sponsor. This is a class I'm really excited to be taking, Product Photography, How to Shoot and Retouch Photos Like a Pro by Daniel Nwabuko. I'm most excited for the light and getting the shot lesson, as I think that's where a lot of the meat and potatoes of great tips for how to improve your lighting will be, but I do really enjoy the drawn out structure of Skillshare classes. Another one I'm looking forward to is DIY Backdrops, Custom Photography Textures by Tabitha Park, and that's what I like about Skillshare. There's so many classes on different relevant topics within studio photography, so that's a great way to pick up new skills from really motivated people like Tabitha. As you know, the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so you can join me and start exploring your creativity today. All right, everybody, here we are inside of Photoshop with our main frame and our rim accent, and I'm fired up to combine these because it's going to look really clean. It'll be really simple, actually, so let me show you how I would do it quite easily. The first thing I would do is drag these photos into Photoshop, and when I get the raw options presented to me, I just hold Alt and drag down the black node just to make sure I'm surrounded in a perimeter of pure black pixels, and there's no dark gray that's going to be playing tricks on me. I know I'm on a consistent flat background. That's going to make things look cleaner. It'll actually hide some dust or imperfections by clipping them to black. It'll also make it consistent for compositing because everything's on the same background. Now our composite's going to be pretty easy. We're just bringing in a simple rim light, but I still want to clean up this base frame before I do that. So let's zoom into the main frame, and with the patch tool, one of my favorite tools, I'm going to do a quick cleanup of this weird highlight and just have a look over my glassware and make sure any dust that was floating in the air, maybe like this, that wasn't caught. We're just going to retouch and make sure it's not looking dusty. And we clean our glassware, but it's just floating in the air. It's quite static, it sticks to glass, and you want to do a quick cleanup. And I like to clean each composited layer so I'm not stacking dust redundantly. And let's bring in this rim light. So we see it's aligned quite well, and if we put it on lighten mode, put the whole layer on lighten mode, you'll actually see it aligns perfectly. And lighten mode, you can only lighten the underlying layer, hence the name lighten mode. So there's an obvious utility in that, but I want to mask this in just up here. So let's hold Alt and click Create a Mask, this button down here. By holding Alt, it'll be emitted, a black mask, and then we can hit B to bring out our brush, And let's get a white brush, a fair size white brush, and just paint this in up here where we want it to exist. And I can do this decently crudely. I don't really care about the perimeter. A curves effect. Hold Alt in between them and clip them by clicking. So now this curve only affects the rim light. And I'm going to darken this curve effect to the point where the only thing that can bleed through on the underlying layer is the rim light itself and not the hazy perimeter around it. That's super useful because now we have a nice effect. And I can hit B to bring up my brush and get rid of anything that isn't looking too nice. Like this sort of weird highlight down here. And get rid of that a little bit. But just bringing in the rim light's only a couple clicks. And that effect with the curves is invaluable just to be able to do that without creating a complex mask. And now that you have a rim light, you don't have to go full out with it, but it's at your fingertips. You can control it as much as you want, and that's a really nice effect. So let's grab everything and group it. Control G. And I'll make a new layer beneath all of this. And let's paste black in that layer. Now what I want to do is create a layer mask around the whole structure here of the glass. So I'm going to create a marquee selection and grab just about everything. And we're confident it's on a black perimeter. And I'll hit this button to create a mask. So now we're on a pure black space. We need to straighten the glassware, but we're looking really clean. Everything's on a pure background, completely flat. And, you know, we're only a few clicks away from a finished looking result, which is great. Let's make this reflection a little smoother, like not so abrupt. Let's make a new layer at the top of the grouping. And I'm going to hit G to bring up my gradient tool. And now I have black in the foreground, so if I do a foreground to transparent gradient, that'll be perfect. I'm going to start here at the bottom holding Shift and let go before the base of the glassware. And that's a good bet for a nice subtle fade out, just to help this look a little cleaner and sit right in space in an infinite black palette, an infinite black canvas, I should say. Now, if we look at our glassware, there might be areas you're not in love with, like this back left part is kind of going to fade out unacceptably. The right side's a little brighter. If you did like something from the right side, you could easily grab it with the selection, Control J to isolate it, and just flip it. Control T, right click, flip horizontal. I do this from time to time. I won't do this today, but if I liked something or needed to save an area, I might use a flipped area. Because if things are looking underwhelming, at least if you flip things, there's something beautiful about symmetry, so you won't underwhelm the viewer in that sense. It can look kind of clean in a catalog way. I won't do that today, but I just wanted to make the point. Another thing you could do is bring in an area from another exposure, just like we did at the rim light. If I had a certain light pattern that looked really nice in the bases, I could do this at scale, bring in maybe the symmetrical shot, and just bring in the base from it as an example. Again, I don't know if I'll do this today, but I'll just align this, bring it to the top, and I just want to paint it in right here at the bottom. So hold Alt, create a mask, and with a white brush in the layer mask, I'm just going to paint this layer in to exist. And it might be a little bright for what we're doing, kind of looks like it's glowing. But I just want to show you could bring something in from another exposure and get a really clean look that's like hand-tailored to what you want. I might bring in a curves layer above this, clip it, and just darken it so it suits the atmosphere of the rest of the shot, because it kind of looked like it was glowing a tiny bit. But that's just a quick, small example of something you could do. And I didn't perfectly mask this in, but that's just a crude example. In the same vein, if we take areas like down here, the stubborn area, which is a really radical angle and kind of tricky to light across multiple glass shapes, we could bring in something like this, but not as bright, and just make it subtle over here to fix an area. Let me show you. I would just grab this and the same sequence, Control J, Control T, right click, flip horizontal. Now I'll put it in a position. That's always the first step. I like to use the left and right arrow key to put it into position, and I don't want to leave this bright. I just want to do it really subtly. So hold Alt, create a black layer mask, and then within that layer mask, let's bring out our white brush, and not 100% flow, just 7% flow, so it's really subtle. I can just do a few strokes of the brush and take a bright area, but just bring it in sparingly, just to recover an edge from going completely dark and us sort of losing it in the perimeter. Because you don't want to lose the perimeter of the glassware, you want to show off the shape of it, and that's, a feature of a decent glassware shot, is showing off something accurately, and flipping things over sparingly can save you in some situations. Another good thing to do is straighten out your product, so hit Control R, and you'll be able to drag in rulers from, whatever which way, and I'm just going to kind of strangle the stem here, or anything that I think might be vertical or horizontal, just to get a look. But I would just do something like that, and then just zoom out and see which way it's projecting. Here it's leaning a little bit to the right. You know, there's a few different ways to approach glassware, but I think the most important thing is typically to make it look great while conveying the material finish accurately to the viewer and the dimensions of the product. I hope you picked up a few tips along the way today. Feel free to download the frames below, like I mentioned in the description, if you want to try following along and editing this for yourself. It's really a reproducible approach across different glass shapes too. Make sure to drop a like on this video and subscribe for more product photography content, because that's all we do. Make sure to click the bell. You will receive our latest videos, and I hope you do. And until next time, guys, keep shooting products and take care.